What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Hardwood Convos here on the 515 Podcast Network. I'm Brock Beirman alongside Hunter Rose for another episode. Just us two again. Chase and Dawson are doing Father's Day stuff, so shout out to all the fathers out there. I feel like this day kind of goes under the radar compared to Mother's Day for sure. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, I ain't gonna lie. Like my dad, at least, he's kind of like, let's do nothing. He's like, this is my day to like work on my projects. This is my day to do stuff. So I feel like it's kind of like, oh, I'll get you a little something, and then that's about it. So
that's what I was thinking too. Like my dad, if anything, would want to be like relaxing all day, doing nothing, left alone, if anything. And instead, my mom forces us to try to do something for him, which is kind of complete opposite of what he probably wants to be doing. I was told, like, why don't you guys like go out to breakfast with him or something like that? And I'm like, he probably the last thing he would want to do for someone that isn't necessarily a morning person is to get up before 7 to go to breakfast and then sit in a line waiting for a spot and then going home. But okay, whatever. And then, we didn't even think about it, but because anytime we go out as a family, my dad usually just pays for the food, and he's like, "Oh, I'm glad I could pay for my own Father's Day breakfast." So, no, it's I don't know, it's just a weird holiday to me because it's complete 180 to what Mother's Day kind of is, because Mother's Day is this huge, at least for my family, is this huge extravagant thing, but Father's Day is just kind of like, yeah, you're a dad. Congrats.
True.
But back on basketball, I guess. We have actually some important things to talk about. I'm not sure. I think we both said that it wouldn't shock us if like the Mavericks won one game, and definitely for me, I wasn't going to be shocked whatsoever as a Celtics fan. But the way they did it was a little more shocking than I anticipated, for sure.
Yeah, man. I think that the biggest thing that I love seeing the Mavericks win. Don't get me wrong. I think the biggest thing I hate to see though is Tim Hardaway get absolutely decimated, because that man was the X factor for the Celtics the game before, to then decide to become the Tim Hardaway Jr. in a 30-point win. So like, you couldn't have done this earlier, man. Like, come on. I almost looked good. And instead,
he had some good looks in game 3. You got to admit that.
Instead, all I've convinced is the box score watchers. They're like, oh my gosh, Tim Hardaway Jr. dropped like, what was it, 15 points? Is that what he had?
Yep, 15 points.
Yep.
15 points, 5 of 7 from 3-point range. I think he went 0 of 5 in game 3. Had some good looks in game 3. A couple of them were honestly halfway down and just didn't go all the way through. So, no points there. But yeah, game 3, Boston was able to pull out a victory. I thought it was going to be a bigger score or a bigger deficit than it actually ended up being after the third quarter, because the Celtics were on fire. But Dallas started showing some signs of life in the end of game 3, got that lead down to single digits, almost actually made it an interesting game in the final minutes of the game. But the Celtics ended up winning game 3, 106-99. But if there's anybody that doesn't believe that you can't take anything from a loss and carry it over to the next game, they need to watch the ending of that game and then watch the beginning of game 4, because Dallas took what they started at the end of the fourth quarter of game 3 and just went off against the Celtics. 34 points in the first quarter. I think that was the most that Dallas has scored all playoff run and in a single quarter, as well as I don't think it's the most that Boston has given up, because I know game 2 against Miami was we don't need to talk about that. That was a stinker of a game for Boston. And this was really a stinker of a game for Boston as well. They only scored 84 points. Not really the performance that we're used to seeing from Boston. And Dallas, on the other end, a team that was shooting like 23% from the 3-point range, 3-point line, shot 41% from behind the arc. And I mean, one of the reasons is your boy Tim Hardaway Jr., but what did you see from game 3 specifically for both teams, and then into game 4? Like, was it kind of like what I was saying about Dallas kind of just carrying over what they started in the fourth quarter, or was it just Boston came into the game with the wrong mindset or something?
Yeah, I don't. I think it definitely. I think part of it is definitely a little bit of a carryover. But even like it was just a weird game because I mean, you take away Timmy's 5 threes, and all of a sudden the Mavericks shoot like 30, a little over 30%, like 33%, I think, from 3-point range. It's like that. That's still not great. That's still not that great. And so, I mean, even at Luca didn't make a single three. Kyrie only made one, and Dante Exum went 2 for 4, and that was the main other guy that made threes. But it was just a weird game. I think the biggest thing was just the lack of not even like lack of shooting is the weird part. I mean, Sam Hauser shot well for Boston, which is what he's paid to do there, even though he
But
can, you know,
even then, it was crazy because he was kind of struggling the first couple games, and even
yeah.
all kind of finals running. I mean, the fact that he was one of the main reasons they weren't ever in this game. Sorry, but one of the reasons that they ended up scoring 84 in Game 4.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think honestly a big piece is even though I just flamed him, last episode, Mr. Tatum about not shooting the ball. It's like it didn't look like many of the Boston people were like trying to find their shot. Like it's don't get me wrong, like they have a great team, and when you have a great team, you don't need somebody putting up 26 shots or how many. Yeah, Luka shot 26 times. The Boston Celtics don't need that because they have so many guys around who can do that. But it's like when you are the number one or the number two option, like Jaylen Brown, who also did not shoot tremendously, but still, it's just like you have to find your shot. That's something when I think about like the Milwaukee Bucks, for example. When I think of Dame, even when he's not shooting the ball particularly well, he's still going to look for his shot the entire game because the moment he does find it is when things start clicking again. And it didn't feel like Boston was doing that nearly as much, at least from what I felt like I saw.
This performance from Game 4 reminded me a lot of their first run to the finals, where they just looked kind of lost completely. Looked like the Dallas Mavericks in the first 3 games, really, until the fourth quarter of Game 3. The Dallas Mavericks looked completely lost. They were turning the ball over, not really putting up the best shots. Their star players weren't really showing up when they needed to. But the roles kind of reversed in this one. Derek White, an irregular 2 for 8 from 3-point range. I mean, he's around a 40-ish% shooter from 3-point range this postseason. Tatum only shot the ball 10 times. Jaylen Brown went 3 of 12. And granted, I think you can say that these stats are skewed a little bit when it comes to how they're not really showing how bad the Celtics played, because the Celtics benched their entire team at the end of the third quarter, which, I mean, good move, honestly, by Joe Mazzulla, because he realized that this game was over, lost cause. So credit to him, instead of trying to be like, oh, maybe we can come back from down 25 at the end of the third, which, I mean, I've seen it happen before, but you don't want to risk it, and then it doesn't happen, and then someone else gets hurt. But
3-0.
Yeah, especially when you're up 3-0, like you said. But it was a bad performance. One of the first times we saw Drew Holiday kind of not perform to the level that the Celtics version of playoff Drew Holiday has done all postseason long. But the plus minus, man, for the Celtics last night, I mean, not last night, 2 nights ago, you just look at the plus minuses for Drew Holiday, minus 38, Jason Tatum, minus 33, Derek White, minus 29, Jaylen Brown, minus 28, Sam Hauser, who I think was the second leading scorer, minus 20. Not at all a good game for the Celtics. There was not one thing about their performance that screamed maybe impressive, except for that they went 12 to 13 from the free throw line, but that doesn't matter when you're not even in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think shout out Drew for being a good teammate. If he did not get minus 38, it would instead be Jason Tatum, who has the lowest plus minus in NBA Finals history. But instead, Drew's like, nah, I got you. Don't worry. But yeah, no, I think this is just one of those games. I think that was one of the things I saw. I don't think it's from any Celtics fan that I saw in particular. But it's just like after a game like this, you're still up 3-1. You had a 3-0 lead. There's no need to like start freaking out. Like this is one game. Does it show you're mortal? Yes, but it also is one game. And
Devil's advocate, the Celtics were down 3-0 last year.
Also true.
And granted, they didn't end up winning the series, but of course, you can always play the what if game. But if Tatum didn't sprain his ankle, I feel like that game may have went a little bit differently. Not saying that Boston would have ended up making the finals, but still, being up 3-0 is not. It is on paper, stat wise, 158-0 when you're up 3-0 in a series, but it's never necessarily guaranteed when you perform like that after going up 3-0.
Yeah. If anything, it just shows, this is still the NBA. There are no, I don't think the Celtics would have approached it like this. But it does show like to anybody else out there watching the game, there's no such thing as a coast game, especially in the playoffs. Even when you're if this were a 1 seed and an 8 seed, we've seen it before.
Yep.
We will see it again at some point. There is no such thing as just cruise into a victory. And so unless, you get a 30-point lead, then you can kind of cruise to a victory. But
it's honestly kind of crazy, though, how quickly the media will go from, oh, is this Celtics team one of the best teams ever, to, is this team going to be the first team to ever blow a 3-0 series lead? Because it seemed like right away people were talking about, oh, Mavericks could push this to 7 after one performance. And, I mean, after that performance, I could very well see that. But the odds of that happening based off of history in the NBA, it's very low. The fact that the Celtics even made it to Game 7 against Miami last year after going down 3-0 is very impressive. But people forget the Celtics, that was their first loss on the road this postseason. And it seems like they have started to figure out their woes on home court. So the fact that they're going back to the Boston Garden is something that, like, again, I'm not, as a Celtics fan, I'm a little worried because, again, I've been in the position where you're down 3-0 and you're able to force a Game 7 and have that hope. But at the same time, I'm not going to completely freak out like I sometimes do, because this team was able to get up 3-0 in the first place. And some of those games were easy, not easy, but like easier games than what the Celtics had to deal with in even the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah. I would still be shocked, even though I'm hoping, because it's the only way for the Mavericks to possibly win this, literally. But it's just I feel like there has to be so many things that have to happen in order for a team to get into that situation. Having a team win by this many points is certainly one of those anomalies that you would look for to have this happen. But whether it's like injuries, whether it's foul trouble just out of nowhere, whether it's just shooting anomalies, like everything has to fall into place somehow for this to happen. And it's hard to do that 4 games in a row or 3 games in a row. And I think the one thing that it does show, especially like you mentioned, where a game, things can carry over, that it definitely can be a competitive series. Nonetheless, we see competitive games, and so I think that's probably the only thing, and that's not even a concern because it's the finals, and you would expect close games in the finals. It does show that hey, this is still a series, but it's also a 3-1 lead series. So.
Yeah. Well, see, now when people say 3-1, I start getting even a little more nervous, just because I thought blowing a 3-0 is hard to happen, but I've seen 3-1s happen more than any other series lead, it seems like. I mean, you mentioned injuries, and I thought it was kind of funny that you sent me a text, I think the day after or 2 days after we did our podcast, saying, wait, is Porzingis actually hurt? And I kind of mentioned it a little bit in the podcast, saying I don't know how much he'll play after that injury. And even when we did it, I think we did the show on Wednesday, right?
I think so.
There was little to no information about the injury. Obviously now we found out that it's a freak of nature kind of injury that's happened. And I mean, you could see him warming up on Friday. I know he's listed as available if needed. He's not available. I think
Yeah.
they just do that to get people off their backs when they just want him to suit up just because it's the finals. But yeah, what was your mindset when you found out the news of that? Because I was going through it expecting Porzingis to potentially be out, not necessarily guaranteeing that he wasn't going to play. But what was your thoughts?
Here I thought like, oh, this guy just like, re-aggravated it a little bit, might need some more bed rest, and like, oh, like, he'll be fine. Little did I know, I find a video then where he bumps knees with somebody and gets an injury that's seen like 20 times in human history, if even. And so I was just like, first of all, how unlucky can this guy be? Like,
this
even
guy
though
is one of the most unlucky players ever when it comes to
like
injuries.
even though he plays for the Celtics, I'm like, dang, man, like that is tough. Like how do you manage to do that? Like I bump knees with someone, I'm like, the Peter Griffin, but this guy, like, all of a sudden has just torn every ligament in his body, like the SpongeBob episode, glass bones and paper skin. I don't know how this guy can keep doing this. But yeah, I think the biggest thing, like we saw how integral and how big he was, especially in that game 1. And so even though this Celtics team's still very, very good, and like, even mentioned before, it's like facing the Avengers, if you're missing one, there's still 4 other Avengers. And so I think it does create, the only thing it does is it has to, shape the game plan a little bit differently. We can't have, this lengthy guy just kind of get these easy mid ranges over people because they're trying to play back more on him or play more, because if you play more up front, he's just gonna, he has enough speed usually to get around with his size. And when you're missing that, makes things a little bit more difficult because you have to find a way to supplement that and find the easiest way to score again. So yeah. And it also helps with the matchups a little bit too for Dallas.
If you're the Mavericks, you're loving it because rookie Derek Lively doesn't have to worry about necessarily switching off of Porzingis, which led to a lot of those 15-footers over shorter defenders. And I mean, speaking of Lively, came off the bench in game 4, had a great game, 11 points, 12 rebounds. I'm telling you, man, this guy, I still feel like the Celtics are going to be able to pull this off. Of course, that's easier said than done anymore in the NBA because, again, anything can happen on any given day. And I think when all is said and done with this Mavericks team, 5 years from now, if they win a championship, it will be because of one of the key factors will be Derek Lively getting drafted there. And everybody, will not always forget that Dallas got fined for tanking for that specific draft pick. Don't know if it was necessarily specifically for Lively at the time, but ended up working out really well for the Mavericks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that game, I saw someone take a screenshot. It was specifically, I think the game that put them there was a game against the Spurs, which the Mavericks ended up losing. And keep in mind, this is the Spurs pre-Wemby, before the draft. Bad. They ended up still losing, which got them to where they were. And that's the finals now. So kind of crazy.
That's just hilarious to think about. Pre-game before game 4, I thought it was a little more interesting than maybe some people may think. And at the same time, I don't think anything's going to actually come from this. But Joel Embiid and Paul George were sitting right next to each other on ESPN's NBA Countdown. And Joel Embiid talked a little bit about what they need, or like they need more pieces to the team to be able to compete or get to the finals someday. He also stated that he hates Boston, which, I mean, Boston hates Philly. Philly hates Boston. So, I mean, that's a given. But when he was talking, he kept looking over at Paul George. And I mean, out of all the players really on this Clippers roster, I feel like Paul George has been the one with the biggest question mark on their future, at least important players for this franchise, on their future with the team. I mean, there's been rumors about Paul George being open to returning to Indiana for one final run with the Pacers. At the same time, I swear I saw something about him going to the Thunder at one point. I don't know how true that's going to be, or if that's even really, I don't know, a good idea for either team. But still, Joel Embiid kept looking over at Paul George throughout the interview, and when they kept asking him what the Sixers need or what's the future look like for him or how can he get to the finals. And Paul George also talked a little bit about how, he hates that this is his first appearance in the NBA Finals, which is kind of funny that they both mentioned that this is both of their first appearances in the NBA Finals, and they're both behind a desk, and they're sitting by former NBA champion Kendrick Perkins, which I mean is still weird to even say when you're talking about two stars and then Kendrick Perkins. But Stephen A was pushing the button a little bit. I called it second-handed tampering with Stephen A of what he was doing. What are your thoughts on what was said during that pregame show with Joel Embiid, Stephen A, Kendrick Perkins, Paul George, and then do you actually see Paul George getting traded or getting moved to Philly?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I want to call out Joel Embiid because this guy wanted to speak on my team. 3 days ago on Twitter, he tweeted out, "Did the Bucks give the Celtics this finals run?" First of all, Mr. Embiid, the Bucks did not trade Drew Holiday to the Boston Celtics. In fact, it was Joe Cronin of the Portland Trailblazers who traded Drew Holiday to the Boston Celtics for, mind you, Malcolm Brogdon and Robert Williams. Maybe we should be talking about that more. And second of all, it was for Damian Lillard. Do not talk on my team, Mr. Never been to an Eastern Conference Finals. Anyway, yeah, no, I also agree with him that I hate Boston. But
I mean,
I think
real quick, do you think Boston is the most hated team in the NBA? They're like
probably, yeah. It'd be them or the Lakers.
See, I even think people cheer for the Lakers when they're in the finals. Maybe I'm wrong.
I bet that has changed. I guess I would agree with you. I think it's changed, especially since as LeBron's gotten older. I think there are definitely some people that still hate LeBron for off the court antics. But I think there's also a lot of people that cheer more for LeBron now, knowing that he's about to retire.
I just hate LeBron because I'm a Celtics fan.
Yeah, and then there's people that hate LeBron.
That's legally I have to.
Exactly.
But no, so getting back to the Paul George situation.
But yeah, I think the interesting thing, so Paul George is a free agent this upcoming year. And the 76ers this offseason will have like 2 people on their team. So they have a lot of money. Now, the one thing, Tyrese Maxey had been on, I think it was his rookie deal. If it's not his rookie deal, it's at least a very, very cheap deal. He was on his team option. So they're paying him $4 million to average like 26 a game. That is not going to be the case next year. Wherever he plays, it will be for a lot more than $4 million. This is not the NFL. And so I would assume he would stay in Philly, but it's going to be for a lot more money. But I mean, especially when you have Tobias leaving, you have, I think Nick Batum's leaving, and he was higher up on there. Let's see here. Yeah, Buddy Hield will be leaving. Those are kind of like the main people. Robert Covington, all and like their top of how much money they're paying this past year, at least. And so if someone were to go there who is a bigger name, Paul George could certainly be on that list. And just based off of his time in LA, I would not be surprised if he left. I wouldn't be surprised with whatever Paul George does. If I'm being brutally honest, I don't think he would go back to Indiana. That just seems like a weird move in my humble opinion. But if he really, really wants to be there, he'd want to be there. I don't know why he would. But yeah, I think it was definitely weird though seeing Embiid. He like gave the side eye.
Yeah,
like
it was multiple times,
which was the weird one. Where he was talking about like, oh, we need this, and then just look at him. And so yeah, I think it's certainly a possibility. I think the one thing that would maybe be more unfortunate if that were to happen is the 76ers would probably put themselves in another Phoenix Suns situation where all of their money will be going towards 3 players and everyone else on the roster will be people who are making no money and are probably not super great and probably wouldn't be on a roster on many other teams in the league. Or at least getting playing time in many teams of the league. And so, yeah, I think I don't think I would put too much on Paul George going to Philly, but there definitely, I would not be surprised if there are some talks about it, because especially with Paul George having his podcast, I'm guessing there will be a lot said on there about it because of the tampering rules. And I'm sure this will bring some light to that in terms of like, hey, maybe Adam Silver might make a little call and be like, don't do this anymore.
Do you think he called ESPN?
I wouldn't
Because
be
like Stephen
surprised.
A was basically just putting it on a tee.
Yeah, I think Stephen A also gets away with a lot more than he probably should because he's Stephen A. But that's me. Uh, so yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Adam Silver at least gave the players a little bit of like a hey, stop, don't do this, or you'll get in trouble. So yeah,
If you were Paul George, what would you do?
I'm Paul George. I don't know what I would do at this point. If I'm Paul George, I'm just going to wherever can give me the most money. Because I think Paul George is still a talented player. Playoff P aside, he is a good basketball player. The question always around him has been with the playoffs, especially since the bubble. And being the guy in Indy all those years ago. If that's behind him now, especially come playoff time. And so I think for me, if I'm him, I'm just going somewhere to get a bag, going somewhere to get that money. Ideally play for a contender, ideally be a number 2, maybe even number 3 option. Number 3 is probably pushing it though, because he's still as talented as he is. And so wherever that is, who knows? Could be somewhere like OKC, could be somewhere potentially like Philly if they have enough money after Tyrese. I don't know how much they're
What's
looking to pay him.
Minnesota's deal right now?
A lot of money to Rudy Gobert, and soon a lot of money to Jaden McDaniels.
I didn't even think about Jaden McDaniels. He had a good postseason.
His contract, because they gave that to him this past year. His contract, I don't think right now is super, super expensive, but as time goes on, he will be an expensive player to have. Which
do you think they move on from Cat? Have you?
I've been saying for years they should move on for
Cat. But
Cat.
have you seen it though more recently, or am I am I getting like memes from people?
I haven't seen it too much. I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up more into the off season. But yeah, if there's a bad take from Hunter, ever since I was a freshman in college, it was that the Minnesota Timberwolves need to get rid of Karl Anthony Towns. Now, whether or not that's still true, I don't think.
Is it because you just don't think he's good, or he doesn't fit the system that they're trying to do?
I didn't think he had the mentality to be a winner, if I'm being brutally honest. He's a great player, but like, there's only so much a great player can do for you if you're winning 23 games a season. I don't think they've had a season that bad. Just putting that out there. But
well,
at the same time, it's
the first pick, so
yeah.
maybe.
But it's like if you want to be a winner, you have to have a certain mentality. You have to be at a certain level. And it's like, man, they have this talent. They have this talented player in Karl Anthony Towns. They're not doing anything with it, so they need to trade him so that way they can be better later. And they end up not doing that, which is a good idea, I guess. So,
what do you think his market is right now?
Well, I don't think anything has recovered since the Rudy Gobert trade. So probably like 6 first-round picks. I don't even know.
I will admit that trade did end up working out for them, and it could potentially work out better than I anticipated it, depending on the next
NBA.
Years. Yes, it's a lot like Kyler Murray signing that contract with Arizona. It broke the quarterback market, and the quarterback market is still trying to recover. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is now the highest paid quarterback, and I think he's led the league in turnovers last year at least. So, not saying that Trevor Lawrence didn't deserve it. I actually picked him to be a sleeper MVP candidate last year, and I was completely wrong, but they did end up losing all their games that he didn't play in. So, but yeah, the trade market is crazy right now, and there are a lot of players. I know you mentioned like market-wise on the free agent market, this offseason is probably not going to be as exciting as maybe others in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think a lot of that does depend on what LeBron does.
That's
because LeBron's a free agent, it will be relatively exciting, but
I doubt he goes anywhere.
Yeah.
If he's anywhere, it would honestly, if he's anywhere but LA, it's Cleveland. Like I really don't know why he would go play for anywhere else. But I've been wrong before. I didn't think he was going to LA the second time that he left Cleveland. I thought he was going to just stay in Cleveland, but hey, he made the right move, obviously. But um, yeah, the free agent market isn't going to be as entertaining as people usually are used to seeing. But I do think the trade market this offseason could be very, very interesting depending on which teams or which players some people are interested in. Like Trae Young, I think is gone. I don't think he's playing in Atlanta next year unless Atlanta pulls off something and they actually set up a good team for the future. LA obviously will be involved. I think both LAs might get involved in the trade market depending on who ends up signing with them or who their star players are. Karl Anthony Towns is probably going to be on the block. And I mean, I'm sorry, but does New York consider trading Julius Randle?
Who knows? Who knows? I think it's definitely a question just because of the fact. I mean, I think it's 2 more years that both him and Brunson have left on their deals. And so they're definitely, I don't think they'll be able to keep both of them unless one of them falls off the face of the planet and they don't have to worry about paying one of them.
And it sounds like Donovan's signing back with Cleveland. From
at least Dawson.
Yeah, so shout out Dawson. At least that's what I saw. Of course, it's not official until someone actually puts pen to paper. But yeah, I think the trade market this year is going to be really fun when it comes to offseason and potentially talking about who's going where and what teams are going to reshape their rosters depending on the situation. I saw some like trade proposal for Trae Young to go to Orlando, and I think it was like Trae Young straight up. Of course, this shows the Gobert market issue for like Cole Anthony, Jonathan Isaac, one other person, and then 3 first rounders.
Oh my gosh. That is
so much. I was like, for just Trae Young, I mean, Trae Young and Paulo would be fun to watch, but is it not just a little bit better version of what Trae Young and John Collins was? Like they would literally be in the same situation that Atlanta was in a couple years ago.
Yeah, I've seen Orlando a handful trades, which for me, I mean,
I think they got a lot of guards.
They have a lot of guards. They have a lot at the point guard, especially.
Yeah.
And I mean, the number one thing we probably saw from this last postseason, now that they are a postseason team, you know, they have built around Paulo and Franz, who honestly, Franz Wagner might be on. I don't think they trade him, but you know, that could be something to explore in a future episode, perhaps. And they definitely, the one thing that we saw though from this off season for them in the postseason was that they need shooters. And so when you have guys like Klay Thompson, guys like Malik Monk, who are not the most exciting names, especially anymore if your name's Klay Thompson, but players that are more on the offensive side of the ball, a bit more renowned and known, it becomes a very inviting and exciting idea to bring them in. So
Klay Thompson unfollowed the Warriors. What does that mean?
He did. And the dynasty, as Brock has mentioned before, might be over.
I think it is
the dynasty that we knew. It's been over, but the dynasty we knew.
I could see something magical happening and like Curry wins one more title with the Warriors, but I think the Warriors that we are used to seeing, it'll be a lot. No, because even the Patriots were kind of like able to keep a lot of key guys throughout their years. They went through different eras of their dynasty. The Warriors really don't have an era type of dynasty. It's more of, yeah, they were good for this span, and then now anything after this year or that last championship in 22, I feel like is just added bonus for Curry and no one else really, because Klay Thompson isn't contributing as much as he used to. Draymond Green is not going to contribute positively to the Warriors.
He making them pay more than what he's given. So
someone to keep an eye on if I'm a team that's willing to make a high risk, high reward kind of trade. I don't know if the Bulls are willing to give him up, but I think Kobe White could be an amazing addition to a team that's looking for just one more shooter, one more offensive guy that they can add that doesn't have to be the second, third, or even fourth option, depending on the roster. I think he had a great year. I think he was second in most improved behind Tyrese Maxey, which, I mean, Maxey deserved it. But that was just another team that came into my mind.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the Phoenix Suns a couple of times. You said before we went live, you wanted to say something about Kevin Durant. I don't know if this is the perfect time to do this, or
we could do this. So for those of you who do not have a chronic addiction to Twitter, or X as it's now called, probably don't, maybe you haven't seen this, but 3 years ago, Kevin Durant dropped 49 points in a Game 5 win against the Bucks. All right. Now we're going to take it on over to StatMuse here. All right. Shout out StatMuse, even though they are not free with some of their things now. If we look at Kevin Durant's playoff career highs, number one, dropping 50 points up against the LA Clippers, this time in Golden State, 2019. Maybe goes to show once again how that finals could have ended for how he was playing. And then the next two games are both from that amazing Nets and Bucks series, dropping 49 and 48. If you keep scrolling, you'll see a lot of times in Golden State. You'll see another one when he's on Brooklyn against Boston, and that same 2021 year. Some OKC times back when that was a fun team to watch, and one Phoenix game up against the Nuggets, dropping 39 points, and then more Brooklyn, more Golden State, and more OKC. So what I am proposing here, Kevin Durant has been riding on one series since 2021. Now, we do a lot of hating on Kevin Durant on this podcast. We all know.
Usually it's just you, but yes, we have all done our fair share.
Hey, you are not free, Brock. You are not free from this. All right, you too. But anyway, I'm proposing that perhaps, Kevin Durant, great player, great offensive piece in NBA history, right? I think he's kind of riding on one series. I think he averaged like 20, 24, like 25, maybe 26. And as they got swept, as we all know, this last offseason. But ever since he has, been on Phoenix, the supposed offensive powerhouse, this team with huge aspirations, I get that maybe they want to keep it as Devin Booker's team since, he's been there. He's bred there. But he's not doing anything. Like this man's legacy is riding now on one series as we move forward. And all I'm saying is perhaps it's time to take him out of this conversation of being as good as he is anymore. It's okay to admit that people get old and that they lose some of their touch. He's still a good shooter, but he's just not doing what he used to anymore. All of this is old news at this point.
I mean, you can say that for his two teammates too.
Yeah, and we keep saying this whole I'm tired of hearing this. I'm tired of hearing this. What if Kevin Durant's toe wasn't on the line? I don't care. It was, and he didn't. Then he went over 6 in overtime. We seem to leave out that fact when we talk about the toe on the line, and here we are still, and he hasn't gotten back to the finals ever since he was on a super team. So I think he's riding a little bit too much on one series, and I think
series he didn't even win.
Exactly, it's crazy. I also hate Twitter sometimes because that's where all this comes from. But yeah,
I mean, I'm shocked that we've went this long without talking about Kevin Durant, even in the playoffs, because we all have our issues with KD, and so. Not shocking that we finally got to that here in the finals episode, one of our finals episodes. But getting back to the finals matchup between the Celtics and Mavericks, Game 5 is tomorrow in Boston. Celtics have a chance to capture banner number 18. Mavericks have a chance to push it back to Dallas for a potential Game 6, which would be huge for them, especially because they get to play in their home arena again. And I know side note, some people mentioned this on ESPN. I can't remember which show it was, but they were talking about whether or not there is such thing as a home court advantage in professional sports. I do. I just don't think the media, some of the media people on those shows said that there wasn't, and there is no such thing. Only in the college game is there such thing as a home court advantage or home field advantage. And I'm like, okay, Kansas City for the NFL, Green Bay for the NFL, Boston for the NBA, LA for the NBA. Baseball depends on the year and the quality of teams. NHL is just loud in general. So I think that argument is like false, and I think there is such thing as a home court advantage. Like tomorrow, Boston fans have been through enough of the blowing of leads, the not showing up when they need to show up. So Boston fans tomorrow are going to be really loud compared to the first two games, I feel like, because it's a closeout game, and they realize that this team has done it in the past where they blow leads, not necessarily series leads, but leads on the scoreboard. So they want to win this game. They want this game to be over, and they want to win the title in Boston, because if it goes back to Dallas, there's a good chance that it's coming back to Boston for Game 7. But getting back to it, Game 5 is in Boston, like I mentioned. Luka and Kyrie are going to have to be the dynamic duo they were in Game 4 to be able to push it to a Game 6. And then Tatum and Brown, I don't think they need to both put up 30. I do think they both need to be over 20 in order for the Celtics to win. But at the same time, they've both done it where like one of them barely gets over 20, one gets 15, and they win by 30. So what are your opinions on this matchup? More specifically, who are you looking at for both teams to step up, and who do you have winning this one?
Yeah, I think Boston especially needs to come out with a lot more energy. I think especially coming after a game where you get flat out embarrassed, like you have to come out the gates ready to go, especially in front of a home crowd. That home court doesn't matter. It's complete and utter BS. It does not take many clicks to get to the standings and be able to, from the regular season, and see records for team at home versus away. And you can look at it throughout NBA history. Teams perform better at home, especially in the playoffs. The playoff atmosphere is very, very different from a regular season atmosphere even. And especially when you're coming, like I said, when you're coming after a game like that and you're in front of a home crowd, you have to come out the gate swinging, which obviously you can say that about any game, but in order for, I think the Mavericks have to match that. It can be easy, especially after a win like this, to kind of, like I said earlier, not necessarily coast and think you can just win the game again because you did it before. But especially on the road, you have to be able to match that energy and be able to play through a home crowd, especially a home crowd in Boston that is known for being very annoying, as I'm sure Kyrie Irving can probably attest to. And so I think some of the bigger factors, I agree. I think especially with the Jays, I think like we mentioned before, like if Tatum is just able to be a playmaker still, I think that's the biggest piece for them. And so I think the other thing too is Drew Holiday needs to not turn over the ball. And Jaylen Brown needs to not turn over the ball.
That needs to be a complete team situation where no one's turning the ball over, because some of them, when they get the turnover bug, it's ruthless.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think especially being able to, I think it'll help too, having maybe a little bit more fresh legs from Missoula, not playing the starters a lot in that second half. But yeah, to be able to keep the bench off the floor, be able to keep your main guys out there, especially when you don't have Porzingis coming off the bench. You especially have to be able to keep a level pace, and be able to continue to move the ball as well as they have and find those open threes that especially Derek White's able to do. So yeah, but then I think on the other side for the Mavericks, I mean, if Tim Hardaway Jr. can do that in a close game, that would be helpful and would ease my own mind.
Do you think he's going to get more minutes?
I could see it maybe off the bat getting a little bit more, kind of see how he shoots, and then Jason Kidd might not play him for the rest of the game if it doesn't go well. Because yeah, that game 3, like he needed to pull him so much earlier, and it did not happen. But I think especially for them, the big thing I think that killed their comeback in that game 3 was the fact that Luka fouled out. For a man, and I've said it before, that Luka is not a traffic cone. I'm going to stand by that his defense is not that terrible. But for a man whose defense is below average, he needs to not foul out, because that amazes me that that's even possible. So he needs to not try and take a
I think it
charge
was the first time he ever fouled out, right?
at least in the playoffs. At least in the playoffs. But yeah, if he cannot take a charge when he already has 5 fouls, that would be smart. But I think that's definitely gonna be the thing for him is, I mean, like I said for Boston even, but Luka in particular has to stay on the floor. He has to be able to contribute, because even if he's not scoring, he's an amazing distributor. And if Kyrie's feeling it, that makes Luka even more deadly, because if he can find a way to even bring off some of the defensive attack, especially from that backcourt from Boston, that'll help out a lot. And so if he's able to stay on the court and create for his teammates, if things aren't even going for him, that's gonna be huge. Which, yeah, not much has changed, I feel like, for these teams, but especially as the stakes are now higher because it is a 3-1 lead now. The Mavericks have to find a way to keep that kind of energy they had from last game. So,
who do you got winning?
I hate this question.
Are we back? If there was a game 6, is it Wednesday, right? Or is it Thursday? Let me look here. It'd be on Thursday. So we'd probably do another show Tuesday or Wednesday, if that works for you. Just to recap the game. Are we back this week talking about a game 6, or are we talking about Celtics winning their 18th championship?
I would love to be talking about the Mavericks winning. I genuinely don't think that'll happen, though, which is sad. But I would like to.
Close game or blowout?
I feel like it'll be a close game. I hope, regardless of how this ends, whether the Mavericks do the unthinkable and get to game 7, or whether Boston ends it here, I really hope it's a competitive last game. And I think that will be the case.
Who do you got for finals MVP then? Because I think it's drastically changed over game 4. Because the game 4 kind of went, okay, well, everybody sucked this game. So there isn't a clear outlier, even when they lose, who the finals MVP is. So do you think it's, I mean, the two people that everybody's been talking about is Drew Holiday and Jaylen Brown. Is it still those two? Or do you think someone could come out of nowhere in this next game and take it away from them? Do you think this game has more weight to winning finals MVP than most game 5s when it's a 3-1 series lead?
I don't think so. I think unless like someone drops 50, which, by the way, I did see some Celtics fans give Giannis props for finding a way to drop 50 points in a closeout game, because that's still crazy. But I think it's still Jaylen Brown, though. I think so, especially. Although it is obviously the finals MVP, I still think voters probably take into consideration more than just that. And I think just seeing how he has been, what he's done for this team in the postseason, I think shows that. And even in the finals, it's not like obviously he played bad last game, because everybody played bad last game. But I think just overall what he's been able to do, especially in that game 3, I think it was like I think Derek White hit a dagger 3 that kind of probably did more putting away, but he hit a tough mid-range too that kind of sealed it. So
doesn't I think I'm wrong. I was gonna say, doesn't like the MLB have like a legit postseason MVP where it's like just over the entire postseason? But I think I'm wrong on that. I think the NBA should get a postseason MVP award out. Yeah. I think it would be kind of cool.
Kind of like the bubble.
What?
Kind of they had like a bubble MVP.
Oh yeah. That's what I would do. I think it would be kind of cool. It would make, like, granted, Jimmy Butler would probably have 1 or 2 of them just based off of the media. But I think it would be something that would reward someone that had a legit great playoff run. And it would give the the issue of, should have LeBron gotten the MVP the year that they got swept or whatever, just because of how good he played. He could have gotten the playoff MVP or whatever. At the same time, there's a lot of awards already in the NBA, so I get the point of not wanting to add another one because it just, I don't know, it makes the others not look as valuable or makes that one not look valuable at all either. And maybe it ruins the finals MVP aura as well. But I do think Jaylen Brown's probably the front runner still, like you mentioned. I could see Tatum if he dropped a 20-point triple-double tomorrow. If he drops a triple-double in a closeout game and he has over 20 points, not a 15-point triple-double, I could see them just giving it to him because, triple-doubles are hard to get for some people. And in a closeout game, I think he could potentially get it. I don't know how early they vote on finals MVP, like if it's right after the game or if it's if the Celtics win, so 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, if the Celtics win this game, who would you pick right now? You know what I mean? Because I don't know how, you mentioned is the media member, so I don't know how long it is to add that stuff up, count the votes or whatever. But I think Jaylen Brown is the front runner for it. I do think the Celtics win this one. I think it's a close game as well. Close game for me is if it shows up as a 15-point win for the Celtics, what was the score with a minute? At the 2-minute mark kind of situation, because it can be a 6-point game at the 2-minute mark and the Celtics win by 15. That's the one thing about basketball is you can lose by 15 and it still be considered a close game in my opinion. You just got to look at what the score was at certain situations. But I do think the Celtics win a close one. I think that they're going to come out guns a-blazing in the first quarter, and then the second quarter they're going to cool down, which is going to allow Dallas to get back in it, which will create that second half of, all right, 2 more quarters. Whoever wins these 2 quarters are going to win it. But yeah, Celtics win, close game. Jaylen Brown wins finals MVP. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have for that. I don't expect to see Porzingis tomorrow. Don't expect to see Porzingis the rest of the finals. Like we mentioned earlier, I think they're just doing that to, one, allow him to be in uniform. Because if I'm being honest, if I'm out, I want to be in uniform still if I'm in the finals. Because that's, I don't know. In my opinion, I think it's kind of cool. But I don't see him ever stepping foot on the court. Unless maybe if they're up 20, 25, and there's 20 seconds left in the game, maybe they check him in for that curtain call. I don't know. Yeah. Especially if it's in Boston. If they did that in Dallas, you know how dirty that would be if they're up 20-25 in game 6 and they check out Tatum for Porzingis and Porzingis gets to dribble the ball out. That'd be kind of hilarious.
That'd be tough. Yikes.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Anything you want to say before we sign off?
I don't think so. It's crazy that, obviously it was could have ended before, but it's crazy to think that the, season, postseason and season itself just about here, just about over. And then we're about in the off season. Crazy to think. So
we're one step closer to seeing Bronny getting drafted, man.
Amen. That's what we're all waiting for.
But we'll be back maybe this week at some point if the Mavericks win. If the Mavericks lose and the Celtics win the title, maybe we wait a while for everything to die down and then recap the entire season. It also matters on all of our availability. I would love to have that recap show be with everybody. So we'll see what we do with that one, as well as people that are wanting to stream our podcast on Facebook. We need to have 100 followers on Facebook, 30 away to be able to stream again. So we need 30 more followers before we can do that again. But until then, you guys are able to watch all of our streams on Twitter, I guess X, and then YouTube, or you can listen to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. 515 Podcast Network is all you need to search up. But for Hunter Rose, I'm Brock Beirman. Enjoy the game tomorrow. Hopefully I get to celebrate. I know Hunter won't be celebrating if the Celtics win. Hopefully I personally, selfishly get to celebrate the Celtics winning their 18th championship. And yeah, enjoy the games. We'll see you guys all later.